Hello and welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale. I am your host, Gabe. This week we are going to be talking about Chapter 9, The Writing on the Wall. So, let's get to a brief recap here. Our chapter opens with several teachers and Filch showing up in the corridor to see what's going on. And Dumbledore, McGonagall, Snape, Lockhart, Filch, Harry, Ron, and Hermione all head to Lockhart's office because it was the closest, so that Dumbledore can better assess Mrs. Norris's condition and determines that she's been petrified but can be resuscitated. Harry, Ron, and Hermione discuss the voice that Harry keeps hearing, and they all agree that it was a good idea that Harry didn't mention it. Although now it does look extremely suspicious that those three were found by everybody in that particular hallway as they were returning to their dormitories from the Halloween feast. The following day, the trio notices the strange behavior of the spiders because they go back to that particular corridor where the warning's on the wall, and they're looking around. They're wondering what happened to all the water that was on the floor. They remember there was a lot of water on the floor, and in their investigation they noticed that the spiders seemed to be running away, which was really weird. And this is where we find out Ron is deathly afraid of spiders because Fred or George, one of them, turned Ron's teddy bear into a giant spider when Ron was only 3 years old. Yeah, I would be afraid of spiders too. So they decide to go into the girls' bathroom. That's right next to where the message is on the wall, and Hermione knows that it's where Moaning Myrtle usually hangs out. And so they go in and talk to Moaning Myrtle about it. If she knows anything about the attack from the night before. And she doesn't. So a little bit later on, during History of Magic, not Transfiguration, it was Professor Binns, not Professor McGonagall, that answered the questions that Hermione had about the Chamber of Secrets. And despite Professor Binns' assertions that it's all nonsense, the trio understands that the chamber has indeed been opened again and that it is not a myth, with all the weird things that are already happening. Harry hearing this weird voice, all the water that was on the floor that turns out to have come from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and getting some history on the Chamber of Secrets, or the rumor of the Chamber of Secrets, according to Professor Binns. Things are not adding up and things are getting weird. And so our trio is convinced that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed real and has been opened. So there are two key points here that I pulled from this particular chapter that I want to talk about this week. And that is the concepts of 1, secrecy and isolation, and 2, prejudice and social division. So we're going to talk about secrecy and isolation first. And this is going to be another psychology heavy episode. As always, my references for all the information I give you are going to be in the show notes. I'm going to share a story from my childhood that is actually quite telling as to why I often keep things to myself. Hold on just one second here. Yeah, I gotta fix some stuff here because I can't see all my notes properly. So bear with me just one moment here. Bam, there we go. Okay, much better. Okay, let's get back up to the top, and my apologies for all of this. Okay, found my place. So under the heading of secrecy and isolation, I'm going to share a story from my childhood that is actually quite telling as to why I often keep things from myself. And this is going to be a vulnerable one because this is a story that I have not discussed much with anybody pretty much since it happened. So bear with me. This is going to be a bit of a vulnerable post, but this explains why I don't trust people easily and why I often keep a lot of things to myself. And that I'm going to give you the spoiler. This has to do with my mother. Okay. So this is also going to explain why I no longer attempt to seek emotional support from my mother because of how she handled things in this particular story. And this is the first time that I really, at least as far back in my memories as I can recall, as I mentioned last week, my memories of my childhood are practically non-existent, and what memories I do have are just flashes, fuzzy, if you get my meaning, because of all the trauma from having a verbally abusive father. So I was 13 at the time, and it was the weekend. I had gone with one of my, I now call my so-called best friends at the time, and her mother to run some errands. It was the three of us. We were at the mall for the last part, and my friend and I had gone off on our own for a little bit, and we ended up getting caught shoplifting. Now, given how naive I was at the time, I thought it was, I don't want to say it was a good thing that I was stealing, but I thought, well, this is just what you do, you know, because somebody being autistic, and this is one thing I learned, and this is one of the first stories that popped up in that trying to figure out what it means to be a human being when I've got a father telling me my entire life that I've been doing it wrong. I don't trust people enough, even my friends that I had, to be vulnerable. I always felt isolated within those groups. We talked at length about that last week. So this was just one of those things that at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. Because this is what you do. I mean, the friend in question was a lot more worldly to me. She seemed to just know more and seemed to be more outgoing and more popular. And just, she was, interestingly, the ideal I looked up to. I had this weird sense of competition with her that I had to be more like her. I don't know where that came from, and I think a lot of it had to do with being autistic, the adults in my life not being strong enough emotional support for me, what have you. But this was a friend that, yeah, I had to be more like her. That is what would get my father's approval. Somehow those two were connected. But anyway, like I said, I thought it was just fine, especially since she came up with the idea, and we really wanted those earrings. It was over a pair of earrings. Anyway, now here's the thing. The woman in loss prevention, I remember this part clearly, kept asking for a phone number for my mom or my dad, and I was absolutely terrified, so I absolutely refused to tell her my father's phone number, and insisted that he was out of town for a couple weeks for work, and I don't know his phone number where he is because my parents are divorced. We live with my mom. Things were such a financial struggle for us in that last year or so before we made the move to Michigan. The same house, grandma's house, in late 1985. Okay, so this had to have been either earlier in 1985 or late 1984. You know, here's kind of the rough thing. So I never gave out my dad's phone number because I didn't know where he was staying. Unfortunately, the finances sucked. Our phone had been turned off at the house. And so, thankfully, because I was with my friend and her mom, the loss prevention lady and my friend's mom basically took responsibility for me. Okay, whatever. And of course, when we got home, she's telling my mother all about it. So I did have to go talk to somebody in law enforcement about this. Thankfully, it was a family friend who, number one, had nothing to do with my father. This was more a separation after the divorce. So it was just the conversations between him and my mom type of thing. But even then, I could tell that he knew that I was the innocent one in this. Not innocent of shoplifting, but I was innocent in the decision. And that he knew it was the friend and not me who kind of dragged us into the situation. And thankfully, I didn't have any issues, no legal issues. I didn't have to do any sort of community service or whatever they would do to a 12 or 13-year-old kid, especially when they got the merchandise back. You know, it wasn't like we made it out of the store. So, no charges, no record, nothing like that, because, you know, the person that made the ultimate decision was that family friend. And I can guarantee you that to this day, my father doesn't know about that. I never said anything to him about it. Anyway, here's the part that stands out quite clearly to me, despite how awful that day was. And that is the fact that a few days later, my grandmother called. This grandmother, the one that built this house, my mother's mother. And because we had phone service again, it might have been a week, you know, it might have been the following weekend, and I happened to answer the phone. Well, Grandma keeps asking me questions about anything exciting happening lately, but she wouldn't come right out and say, oh, your mother told me you got caught shoplifting with your friend. Do you think I was going to say anything to my grandmother about that? No, because I was instantly pissed that my mother opened her big mouth and said something in the first place. So I played dumb with my grandmother for a while, passed the phone on to my mother, and let me tell you how mortifyingly embarrassing that was for me. Over the years, I have had flashes of similar situations. When I was younger, my parents are still married. My mom's on the phone to Grandma. She's on the phone with my aunt. She's on the phone with one of her stupid friends. And, oh, Gabe did this or Gabe did that. And sometimes it was fun to listen to. But other times it was just as mortifyingly embarrassing as this moment. As an adult, there have been a couple times where my mother and I worked for the same employer. We were doing two separate things. This was at a hospital. My mother was part of the registration for the emergency room. She was that first point of contact for patients when they walk in the door, chest pain, whatever. They see my mom first. I was also part of registration, but I was in the department that verified all the insurance benefits, made sure authorizations were in place for anything scheduled to come into the hospital for any reason, whether it was, gastric bypass, new hip replacement, open heart surgery, and just the little things, prior to the big surgeries, they have to come in special for a chest x-ray or an MRI or whatever. I was doing all those benefits. So we were technically in the same department, worked with the same people when it came to staff meetings and stuff. But we were in two very different positions as far as our roles. And my supervisor at the time did not like her. Did not like this woman. And of course, naturally, I'm venting to my mom. I'm fairly new to this job. I am not going to bitch about this at work to any of these people because I don't know them. I don't trust them. Well, one evening, I worked the 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. shift, as did one of my favorite employees who worked in the main registration office. she was the one checking in the patients that I did the benefits for. So she did that stuff. And so we would often walk to our cars together, arriving at the same time. Our office was right across the street from the main admitting building at the time. So she and I really liked her. So she and I would often, walk to our cars after work together and chit chat. Well, this one day she comes out. Oh, I hear you're having a problem with supervisor. The only person who could have told her that was my mother, because I was still fairly new as an employee. I was not saying anything about how I actually felt about this woman to my coworkers at all. My mother does not have a program in her brain that tells her, oh, maybe I shouldn't say something like this. At least not while she's listening. And I should only talk to people that I trust to keep their mouth shut if she felt the need to talk about it. As my mother, I get that. There have been times where I've needed to talk to certain people because of something my son did that just frustrated the fuck out of me. Okay? I get it. But not when you could potentially make a lot of problems for me, because if that, and I assumed it did get back to my supervisor, I did not know what kind of hellfire was going to be raining down on us, because as a child, when I would not say anything, and my mom's like, I can't help you unless you tell me what's wrong. I'm not telling you what's wrong because you're going to go tell the person that's giving me the most difficult time here, and that is my father, because she can't keep her stupid mouth shut. It is a thing with me. It frustrates me. That is why I do not depend on her for emotional support anymore, and why I desperately need therapy, because my brother doesn't listen either. So to not even have a best friend or somebody you trust just to talk about the big heavy things going on, it's a lot. And after 12 and a half years of PTSD and trying to work that out and figure that out and what that means, I'm grateful I thought to start this podcast. Let's just say that, because it's given me a chance to get those things out of my head. So let's back it up to the I got caught shoplifting story, and she had to go blab to grandma first thing. So all of the years up to that point, with my mother telling me that she can't help if I don't tell her what's going on, when my father did his thing, and now I'm crying in the room feeling stupid for being excited, proud, whatever, that I couldn't wait to share with him and my mom. Why would I say anything? It's already bad. I don't need you to go flapping your gums to that man and make it 10 times worse, because I knew that's what would happen. So when I say she doesn't have that programming in her brain, even when I tell her this stays between us, somebody else always finds out, and not from me, because it never does stay between us. So let's pull this back into Harry's story so I can calm down. It's little wonder that he refused to tell anyone about the voice he kept hearing that resulted in him, Ron, and Hermione being in the wrong place at the wrong time after the Death Day party, with Mrs. Norris being petrified. And so I certainly understand why Harry never mentioned anything about it to anyone other than Ron and Hermione. Because true to form, neither one of them said anything. They agreed that Harry did the right thing in not mentioning it when they were all in Lockhart's office. So we're going to talk about something much more touchy in the current climate of the world right now, especially here in the United States, and that is prejudice and social division. Clearly, we see and hear a lot about it, and we have done up to this point. With Harry's story, because thanks to Draco Malfoy and his parting shot at the end of last week's chapter, the Death Day party, and his pureblood mindset, you'll be next, mudbloods. And I figure it's time to mention this because moving forward throughout the rest of this book, it definitely spills over into how Harry is treated, especially in a couple weeks with what happens in chapter 11. That's the Dueling Club chapter for those who are familiar with the story. So, in short, I want to mention that there is an abundance of peer-reviewed research. Not some meme, not somebody talking out their ass on social media. Peer-reviewed research showing that embracing diversity is beneficial to any social group. From a small study group at school to communities and societies. Okay? What breaks my heart is just how many people act like that pure blood mentality is the right one, when a group who is diverse is actually stronger in the long run. And we're going to dig into that a little bit as to why. And let's consider it more from the perspective of whatever town, city, suburb, community you live in. Okay, let's look at it at a city or town level. It could even be county level. Okay, so the pureblood mentality tends to look down on those employed in less desirable jobs. You remember how rude Lucius Malfoy was to Arthur Weasley back at Flourish and Blotts, and how often Draco gives Ron shit for Arthur's pathetic position with the Ministry. Okay, if you live in a community full of people who only hold desirable jobs, but not those that are necessary, the mechanics, any caretaking, nursing, although I would argue nursing, a lot of people go into nursing, but we definitely need nurses. But things like that. Child care, elderly care, janitorial work, sanitary workers. So our garbage pickup every week. How could such a community survive and care for its citizens if the bulk of the community are doctors and lawyers and highfalutin type positions like that, positions of that Lucius Malfoy would find acceptable? Okay, and you didn't have a lot of people who did the rest of it, who worked at the Social Security office, who works at the banks, who works at the grocery stores, who works to fixing our roads, who building our houses and fixing our roofs, plumbers. Can you imagine what would happen to your community if everybody was basically doctors and lawyers and dentists? For example, that is why a pureblood mentality is so dangerous to the community. Again, whether it's the study group, whether it's an entire country, we need to have diversity in order as a group to survive. Yet you get people like the Malfoys who believe they are above such positions and look down upon, often with outright hostility. I mean, think about Draco and all of the shit that he has said up to Harry and Ron specifically, Harry, Ron, and Hermione specifically, and his attitude toward them. Think of that scene in Flourish and Blotts and some of the shit that Lucius has said to Arthur before they got into their fight. However, in a community that embraces diversity, we often find those who prefer doing such jobs and tasks, especially when they become necessary, such as during a natural disaster. What would happen in a community of doctors, lawyers, and dentists if you had nobody willing to clean up after a tornado or after a flood? Huh? Not to mention that a pure blood society would be so fucking boring, because pure blood societies, in my experience, tend to be the most rigid in their thinking as far as that. Now, I want to do this, this, and this. Oh, well, I'm instantly better than you. But. So, which is, despite my feelings about it, it's not to say that the pure blood ideas are completely completely bad, and that embracing diversity ideals are completely good. And I had my ChatGPT tool break it down. So we're going to break it down first into the pros. The first list: those of us who embrace diversity and recognize strength in numbers, the more diverse our group is. The pros: brings a variety of skills, perspectives, and experiences that enhance problem solving and innovation. It encourages adaptability and resilience in diverse situations, and fosters inclusion and cooperation across different backgrounds, reducing prejudice when well managed. Now, for those who hold pure blood ideals, some of the two pros of this may be to promote a strong sense of tradition and identity in a group. And I will be diving into this later when we get more and more exposure throughout the series to, and I'm thinking Order of the Phoenix and later. Okay, when we start seeing Voldemort come back to power and what that means and what that looks like, we're going to dive more into that. But traditions are not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, but a pure blood ideal does promote a strong sense of tradition and identity in a group. And it maintains perceived purity and lineage, giving certain families historical power. I cannot think of any. I'm not well versed in history. History is not one of my passions or anything like that. So to be honest, I cannot think of a good actual situation in which a family holding historical power is a good thing. Okay. If you're more of a history buff and you want to contribute, please put it in the comments. I would very much be interested in seeing, if there's any real world examples that we can turn back to. So let's look at the cons of embracing diversity. Embracing diversity in a community requires effort to manage differences and potential conflicts constructively. Because when egos start coming out, everybody's convinced that they're right, instead of looking at it in a, okay, well, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, then we'll try that. That would be a pro of diversity. If you have somebody leading who is willing to embrace different ideas, let's just see what works. Let's see what works. But when people start getting into their egos in a diverse community, now that's when you start having problems with those conflicts and being able to deal with those conflicts constructively. May also face challenges in communication and cohesion without inclusive leadership. Okay. Think about what's going on in the United States right now. We do not have inclusive leadership. Despite being a country of immigrants, despite being the melting pot. Yeah, we're starting to see those divides happen. And then the final part is diversity without inclusion can lead to tokenism and superficial unity. South Park did it best with a character named Token, last name Black. And yes, the character is black, making Token the token black of the group with Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman and their fellow classmates. So let's look at the downside of the pure blood mentality, and I think y'all know where we're going on this. That this can actually promote exclusion, prejudice, and racism against those who are not pure. Limits adaptability as homogeneity reduces diverse perspective and skills. Again, what are you going to do in a community that is mostly doctors, lawyers, and dentists? And you don't have enough people working the retail jobs, working at the gas stations, doing the garbage pickup, fixing the roads, fixing the buildings. Okay. Another downside is it risks stagnation and inbreeding. We touch on that later in the series with the Sacred 28. Harry Potter fans know. Risk stagnation and inbreeding due to narrow gene pools. Oh. Ron said this best a couple chapters ago when they're all at Hagrid's and he's burping up slugs after Malfoy called Hermione a mudblood. He was saying that if wizards and witches had not started marrying muggles and creating half-bloods, wizards would have died out. Ron is 12 years old and he understands that concept. That if, witches and wizards hadn't started marrying muggles, they would have died out. Hell, he's burping up slugs because he tried to curse Draco for calling Hermione a mudblood. That's what pure blood ideals do, is they look down on other people who are not what they consider pure. Hermione, her parents, her lineage have been muggles for generations. Okay? And despite being the best in the class, people like Malfoy and pretty much everybody in Slytherin house look at Hermione as less than. And then the final takeaway from this is with pure blood ideals are often associated with oppressive social hierarchies and discrimination. We're going to circle back to this at the end of the story because I'm thinking about Dobby. I honestly do not understand how we got to this point at this stage of human evolution, but here we are. And it is safe to say that groups embracing diversity tend to survive and exist stronger together compared to groups holding rigid pureblood ideals. Psychological and social research shows that diverse groups bring broader range of skills, experiences, and perspectives that enable them to adapt, innovate, and respond effectively to complex challenges. This resilience and flexibility provide an evolutionary and practical advantage. In contrast, groups adhering to exclusionary pureblood ideologies often suffer from internal divisions, prejudice, and limited skill set, reducing their overall effectiveness and cohesion. Real-world studies on diversity in various contexts support that inclusive groups foster cooperation and problem-solving, which lead to better survival outcomes both socially and organizationally. For example, diverse blood donor pools improve medical treatment for patients across ethnicities, illustrating the tangible benefits of genetic and cultural diversity. In contrast, exclusionary practices restrict adaptability and reinforce social structures which undermine long-term sustainability. Thus, from psychological, social, and real-world perspectives, embracing diversity is a vital factor for group survival and strength, while exclusionary pure-blood ideals are limiting and weakening over time. As always, you are free to live your life any way that you wish. Okay? Please understand, however, that I have very, very, very little patience with those who embrace pure blood ideals, because in my experience, this is not scientific. I am speaking from my experience. All 54 years of experience I've had interacting with other people, those who embrace pure blood ideals tend to exhibit considerable hostility towards others. As I am recording this, I have spent the last 2 days doom scrolling on TikTok because I got sucked into person after person after person who surprisingly claim to be Christian and are clearly MAGA Trump supporters, are cheering on the fact that in just, where are we now? 6 days, millions of people across this country are losing access to food through their food stamp benefits, or SNAP, supplemental nutrition, and I don't remember what the AP stands for, but it's food stamps. People are fucking cheering this on. I have just said that I have very, 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 very little patience with people out there who are cheering this on. It is none of your fucking business what got a person to the point where they are willing to jump through the hoops it takes to get that assistance in the first place. And for those of you watching this and you're yelling at me and arguing at me through your phone, through your computer, thinking I am in the wrong for supporting human beings having food, there is something seriously wrong with you. That you think it's okay that other human beings are not going to have access to food. You do not know another person's life. You do not have the right to make that judgment. Keep it to yourself. You can think what you want, but you're out there on social media celebrating that. You are a fucking disgusting human being. And no, I do not allow people like that into my life. I don't. Okay? And it's that pure blood ideal. Well, if you just do this and you just do that, you do not know what advantages and disadvantages a given human being has had to endure in their entire fucking life to bring them to the point where right here today, November 2025, October, as I am recording this, are about to lose access to food. In my experience, those who embrace those ideals tend to exhibit considerable hostility toward others, particularly toward those they consider impure or beneath them in status. They often express prejudice, discrimination, and aggression against others they deem inferior, reinforcing social hierarchies through fear and violence because you think another human being should not have food. And this hostility is not just passive discrimination, but can manifest in verbal abuse, social ostracism, and even lethal violence. So, for those of you out there who are screaming at me through your phone, through your computer, about what I just said about the current state of what is going on in the United States at the end of October, as I am recording this, that millions of people are not going to have food. Every single person I have found over the last 2 days on TikTok that showed up saying such disgusting things, I go into their profile and surprise, surprise, they're Christian. I am going to put this to you. Tell me, book, chapter, and verse, where it said, where Jesus said. Don't pull that first Ecclesiastes bullshit on me. That was Paul, not Jesus. Where Jesus or God, those are the only two entities. I want you to tell me book, chapter, and verse where in the Bible it says, when you hear that millions of people in your country are going to be without food, you have to go on social media and fucking celebrate this. And be a cold, heartless piece of shit. You show me book, chapter, and verse in the Bible where God or Jesus said that. First Ecclesiastes does not count because that was Paul who said that. I am talking God or Jesus. There isn't one. Psychologically, this hostility stems from fear, insecurity, and the need for identity and control. How are you people out there creating the identity you are creating for the rest of us that actually have a fucking heart and soul for and compassion for other human beings? You are Lucius Malfoy. You are Voldemort. You are Bellatrix Lestrange. You are a fucking Death Eater. You suck. Having navigated so much of the bullshit I've endured on my own with little to no support and validation, I've learned that the only way to move forward beyond that fear and insecurity that you are all feeling, celebrating people going without food, you Christian, is to do the hard inner work of cultivating self-validation. You have to get beyond your desperate need for external validation. That means embracing your own worth, values, and identity, and being brutally honest with yourself that you are a shitty human being without relying on others to affirm that. I'm not a shitty human being. Being I'm going to walk away from it. I'm going to walk away from it because I could be for hours. Doing the deep inner work means being brutally honest with yourself that I am a shit human being. You know, I'm reading the Bible and there is no book, chapter, verse that says I should be on social media cheering on the fact that millions of people are not going to fucking have food. Like it's a moral failing of some kind. You're the moral failure. It means embracing your worth, values, and identity without relying on others to affirm them. This internal grounding replaces the shaky foundation of approval seeking with a secure sense of self that no external threat or prejudice can easily shake. So for those of you out there, if you're still with me at this point and you're screaming at me that I'm the terrible person because I actually want those millions of people to not lose food access, that I'm the problem, I don't care. I have been doing the work. I know what food insecurity feels like because my father was a piece of shit. When we moved to Michigan, we had to stay with him over the summer. I don't know how many times during a given 3-month period where we're at my dad's, my mom's staying with a family friend, that my brothers and I had to call my mom to eat, even though that was my father's responsibility because he wanted us with him so fucking bad every summer. The lack of empathy and compassion you people have, you can say whatever you want to me. I don't care. But I will never be the sort of person that celebrates and rejoices the fact that another human being is suffering in any way. That is the power of knowing who you are and doing that work and not worrying about what anybody else says or thinks about me. You can think I'm the problem for the rest of your fucking life. I don't care. I am happy with who I am because I have done the work. In other words, true healing and growth comes from turning inward and building resilience from within rather than trying to control or dominate others to feel safe. That is what I see from those of you celebrating the fact that in less than a week, millions of people in this country will be losing access to food. A basic human right, not a privilege for you. It is a right for every single human being to have food. But you control and dominate others to feel safe about yourself. You think it's a good thing that other people, millions of people in the United States alone, are going to lose access to food. That makes you feel better. You have not done the work. All right? Because somehow it makes you feel safe because of fear and your own insecurities. This path transforms fear into strength and division into understanding. It's a journey of reclaiming power over one's own narrative and breaking free from destructive cycles of prejudice and hostility. In other words, who fucking cares what anybody else thinks about you? All those people, you sitting there upset with me, yelling at your phone, yelling at your computer, listening to me talk about this. You're yelling and shouting at me like I'm the fucking problem. Why do you care what I think about you? Why are you yelling at your phone? Why are you yelling at your computer, listening to me say these words? Why do you care what I think about you? How does that have any effect on who you are as an individual? And yet, that's the only thing people like you seem to be worried about. You have no clue what it really means to be you. No matter how supportive those in your personal circle are, they are not you. Let me reread my notes again. Who fucking cares what anyone thinks of you? They have no clue what it means to be you. No matter how supportive those in your inner circle are, they only know what it's like to be them. My mom only knows what it is to be her. My son only knows what it is to be him. I only know what it is to be me. The opinions of anybody outside of this body and this brain, nobody knows what it is to be Gabe, except me. I'm Gabe. You also have no idea what it is to be them. Circling around to my original point. You do not know what circumstances, what options people had at any given time, making decisions that led them to a place where they are losing access to food, and you're celebrating it. I'm not judging. They're humans. They deserve to have food. End of discussion. The only rule in all of this is not to harm somebody else. When you start understanding what it is you want and how you want your life to go, you have absolutely zero right to treat another human being like garbage in any way, shape, or form. You have no fucking right to starve them. You have no right to manipulate them. You have no right to abuse them in any way. Sexual, physical, mental, emotional, verbal. You have no right to human traffic them. You have no right to exploit them. You have no right to bankrupt them, to bribe them, to blackmail them, to extort them. You have no fucking right to do any harm to another human being in the name of getting what you want. Those are the ideals I live by, because all humans have the right to food, clean water, shelter, pursuing the life they want, so long as they don't harm anybody else in the achievement of getting the life they want. None of us as human beings have the right to do that. None of us. And it is absolutely disgusting to me that so many of you out there do treat other human beings like garbage. And more often than not, for things they have no fucking control over. Okay? The color of their skin. Their appearance. And I don't mean wearing makeup or how they do their hair. I'm talking basic height, weight, what their hair looks like naturally, what their skin looks like naturally, their sexual orientation, their gender identity. I just thought of a good way to explain this one. So many of you people out there are fucking terrified of transgender people. Think of transgender people like this. Okay? So, polyjuice potion. All right? I think this is an excellent way to say this. So let's say I take polyjuice potion with the hair of, let's say, a man. Okay? And let's say I'm doing something long term, so I have to present as this person the whole time. Externally, you're all going to judge me and think, oh, she's male. That's a male. That's a man because of how I present. When internally, I'm still Gabe. The only thing that polyjuice potion does is change the outside. So people who are transgender are essentially stopping taking the polyjuice potion. They have the gender reassignment surgery for the outside so that the outside matches the inside. And what I just said, they are the only ones who know themselves. And when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, essentially making a copy of a copy of a copy with genetics and mixing them with other genetics, you're going to have things that are weird. That's why people are autistic. That's why people have Down syndrome. That's why people are transgender. Sometimes in nature, things get messed up. So why is it so difficult to think that a female programmed brain in a male body is a moral failing when that female wants to present as female and has the surgeries to do so? Are they harming you in that? Are they causing your house to burn down with your entire family trapped inside, and now you're left to live with the echoes of their dying screams because you were the only one that got out? Did anything big and major like that happen as a direct result of that transgender woman having the assignment surgery so that she on the outside now looks female as she was programmed on the inside in her brain? No. Shut the fuck up, sit your ass down, and leave them alone. They are not the problem. Your fears and your insecurities are the problem. Another one, physical disabilities and physical limitations, accents and language ability. We all learn language differently. Some of us are great at learning other languages, especially as adults. As somebody who's autistic, I pick up accents easily. You put me anywhere different for a week, and I come home sounding like I'm a native. I hear it change every time I go to California for a visit. It becomes more California than Michigan Midwest. You put me in Britain for a week, I'm going to come back sounding like I was born and raised in Britain. You put me in the Deep South, I'm going to come back sounding like Dolly Parton. That is an autistic brain, and I have described it my entire life as, if it's not coming out, my own voice in my ears does not sound like what's around me, it hurts my brain. If that makes any sense. It probably doesn't make sense, but some of us pick up accents and some of us sound the same. I had somebody I worked with at the hospital years and years ago. She was from Fiji, and it's predominantly a Hindu population. And she has been in the United States for decades. I mean, I think she was like early 20s when she moved, and she's a bit older than I am. So easily 3-4 decades. And she still sounds like she just got here. Everybody is different when it comes to accents and languages. And yet there's a significant number of you out there who have a problem with that. Socioeconomic status or family background. Yes, people can rise above growing up poor. But they have a lot more disadvantage than those of you born with silver spoons up your ass. Mental health conditions. We can't help that. Cultural or religious differences. Religious, I'm going to set that one aside. Cultural, yes. Because there is so much about the American culture that until I visit another country and actually experience that difference, there is so much that we don't think about that is just automatic to our programming, growing up in a specific culture. You can learn. Yeah. And the last one that I have on the list is being too sensitive or emotional. I cry a lot. A lot of times I feel like my emotions are right at the surface, good, bad, or indifferent. It doesn't matter. Okay. But I'm always going to be like that because that's just how my brain was programmed at birth, or at conception, actually. But the point I want to make with this is that those excuses, any human being that is treated like shit because of any of the things that I just listed, are used to justify bullying by the rest of you out there, by blaming inherent unchangeable traits of the victim and shifting responsibility away from you, the bully, to and disguising prejudice as a reason, and it is absolutely fucking disgusting. That black person, that brown person, that yellow person, that orange with green polka dot person, they cannot help. That's what happened. And you're treating them like garbage. So, I'm going to wrap things up. I'm just looking. We just ticked over the 1 hour mark on this episode. This is absolutely my longest episode to date. And in case you haven't noticed, I am extremely passionate about being a humanitarian. Because the fundamental truth is we are all human beings. We all have the right to food, to clean water, to shelter, to pursuing a life that we want to pursue. And specific to this country, we have the right to pursue an education if we want. We have a right to health care that doesn't fucking bankrupt us because we are human and we exist. That is the only criteria. I could go on. I'm going to shut this down. My apologies for going on my rant this week, but if I don't shut this down now, I could keep going for another 3 hours, and I don't wish to do that. So, deep breath, Gabe. Next week, we are going to dive into Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. Until then, the Chamber of Secrets has been open. Do take care. We'll see you next week.